We are recording is in progress, everyone. So that is your first announcement, is that we are recording this. We have automatically muted you just to start things off, but later there will be time to ask questions, make comments, and you're welcome to unmute at that point. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening for this artist talk. My name is Alison Crites. I'm the manager of exhibitions and interpretive engagement here at SVAC, the Southern Vermont Arts Center. There is a chat function too, so we encourage you to use that during the presentations. If you think of questions or have comments, please drop those in the chat, and I will moderate the chat towards the end of the program when we have time. For questions. So thanks, John is saying hello to everyone. So yes, please feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're joining from this evening. Before I introduce our guests, Barbara and Hilary, I just wanted to take a few moments to set the stage a little bit for you all. So as I'm sure you know, Barbara and Hilary both have solo exhibitions at SVAC right now that will be on view until August 1st. And our solo program is a little bit different from other types of exhibitions that we organize here. And what I mean by that is that when we make decisions about which artists to select for solo shows, and we usually select about 10 artists at a time, we're really sort of assessing people on an individual basis and making decisions based on what we think are these artists' ability to create really strong standalone experiences in the galleries. And this is quite different from when we're working on a thematic exhibition. In those instances, we're really trying to make connections between artists and artworks and hoping that everything will come together and help create sort of a cohesive narrative for visitors. But we're actually not looking for cohesion with our solo exhibitions. We really want each gallery to offer visitors a pretty distinct experience. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I think it's kind of interesting for you all to know that in curating this exhibition, I didn't have any sort of agenda or interest initially in trying to connect Hilary and Barbara's artwork. This all came together pretty organically after their artwork was on the walls. And then I sort of started feeling this like gravitational pull between their two galleries. And so I threw this idea out to them. Would they consider doing a joint artist talk? And I have to express my appreciation to you both for taking the time to explore these potential connections between your artwork. I think they're there, and I found it very enriching to hear you guys talk about your work and find those connections. I think you found it enriching too. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be hearing about a joint exhibition of Barbara Ishikura and Hilary Tait Norod. So that would be something to look forward to. But before I turn it over to Barbara and Hilary for their presentations, let me just introduce them briefly. So Hilary Tait Norod is joining us this evening from Weymouth, Massachusetts. She is a large-scale surrealist and abstract artist who works out of her home studio. Hilary graduated from Lesley University's MFA program as the recipient of the Presidential Award and Scholarship in 2018. She also earned her BS in Studio Art from Skidmore College in 2009, where she was awarded the Jesse Solomon Award for Most Outstanding Painting, and she also received honors in her thesis exhibition. And most recently, she was selected as one of the 2019 Walter Feldman Fellowship finalists from the Arts and Business Council of Boston. Barbara Ishikura also joins us tonight from Massachusetts. Her studio is in Hudson, Mass. Barbara creates comical paintings that investigate the objectification of women throughout history, as well as notions of good and bad taste within social class. She received a BFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art, an MA in linguistics from Harvard University Extension, and an MFA from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, where she currently teaches drawing. Among the many fellowships and awards that Barbara's received include an Excellence in Teaching Award from Harvard University in 2008. And in 2019, Art New England selected Barbara as one of the 10 emerging artists to watch. So thank you both for being here, for all the work that you've put into your presentations. I'll turn it over to Barbara, who'll be giving the first talk tonight.
Okay, thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I just want to check, can everyone see my screen, Alison? Yeah, okay. So good evening. I'd like to begin by thanking you, Alison, for inviting me to have a solo exhibition at SVAC. It's been a really exciting experience for me. Also, thank you to Hilary for sharing the space with me tonight. I can hear someone has their mic on. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back some years to my childhood. I was born 1 hour south of Boston. I was born into a lower working class Catholic family. And I was definitely one of those kids that liked to draw a lot. So my earliest memories are of filling coloring books and doing a lot of drawing. And about the time that I was in the 5th grade, my mother sent me to a neighbor's house for some art lessons. And so this is a drawing from that period, Madonna and Child. And I know it's from that period because of the pastels and the paper that it's done on. So this, this next image, acrylic on canvas board, is also from that period. And so I thought that it would be interesting to show you these first 2 images to express that working with the female body is something that's not terribly new to me. In fact, I've been making images of the female body for quite some time now. And I thought about why this might be. My parents had a large family. They had 7 children. And I have 2 older sisters and I have 4 brothers. And I was born in the middle of the 4 boys. And I really do think that that experience made me very aware of my femaleness. And though I didn't have language for it at the time, I think it made me very aware of the gender constructs that we're all born into. This is Flamingo Dancer. So jumping ahead quite a few years, I did end up going to art school. I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art. And this is a sculpture from that period. I was a sculpture major. And these are actually my grandmother's dresses. She called them house dresses, and I dipped them in plaster. And while they were still wet, I stuffed them with newspaper to shape their form. So I thought that this particular piece from my undergrad program would be interesting to show you, because looking back at them now, I'm looking at their droopy breasts and the bulging bellies, and also the ornamentation. You know, this image is not terribly different from the images that I'm making today. So I graduated from MICA in 1985. And at that time, it was really hard for me to imagine how I would support myself as an artist. I didn't come from an art family. And the first time that I stepped foot into an art museum wasn't until I was in college. So I took my first job teaching for the Ministry of Education in Japan. And I'm here in the lower right-hand corner. This was my school in Japan. And this experience set me on a very different trajectory of teaching English in academia for the next 20 years. I also met my partner in Japan. So as I said, I was teaching in academia I was teaching languages for about 20 years. And around the time that I was in my mid-50s, I got tired of hearing that voice in my head that I needed to return to my artwork. So I listened to the voice, and I left my job and I entered an MFA program at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. This, what I want to say about that experience is this was an incredible experience for me. I finally felt like I landed in the right place. There was a sense of ease about everything. I loved my cohort. The professors were amazing. So it really was a very special time for me. And just as I was about to enter my second year of grad school, I got very sick. And so I had to make a decision about whether or not I would continue in this very rigorous MFA program. And I decided that I would, that I thought perhaps it would be the program and my artwork that would pull me through, help me along. So I stayed in. So this image here, Hail Mary, you can see I'm in a hospital gown on the right side. And on the left side, I'm being tipped upside down in my hospital bed, receiving a treatment. So this painting here, a rather large painting, is also from my second year of graduate school. And one day, my professor came into my studio, James Cambrone, and I was explaining to him how I didn't feel any separation between myself and the painting. I felt as if I was the painting and the painting was me. And I felt as if I was painting with this sense of urgency, almost like I was painting to save my life. And James looked at me and said, okay, Barbara, I can give you a degree now. And it was at that moment that I clearly understood that for me, I was making images to understand the world around me. And more specifically at this time, I was making images to understand what was happening to my body. And this becomes more and more important to me as I go along. So I graduated from Mass Art in 2018, and I'm now teaching at Mass Art. And my health is really on the upswing. I'm starting to feel a whole lot better. And so I think about looking outside of myself a little bit for inspiration. And as always, I look at art history. I'm a big fan of art history. And I came across this painting by Suzanne Valadon, a post-impressionist French painter. And I was really struck by this painting. Valadon was painting at a time that not only did women not have access to education, they didn't even have access to the atelier or the artist studio. And in fact, the only women that were allowed in the artist studio were the nude models. And in order to be a nude model, you had to either be of the working class or you had to be a prostitute. So because Valadon was of the working class, she was a model, and she happened to also be an artist, she had access to the studio and she was able to see what the male painters were up to, and she was able to learn about their technique. So while the male painters were painting the female image in the image of their own fantasy, Valadon was painting women in the image. She was painting women as she experienced it in her own body. And you can really feel that here in this painting, this rather robust, strong woman, a cigarette dangling from her mouth. And clearly she hasn't been using her parasol. She has sunburn on her arms, sunburn on her neck, really an indicator that she's of the working class. So this is my painting, Odalisque with cigarette and beer, inspired by Valadon. And as I said, you know, I'm feeling much better now as I'm doing this painting, but in hindsight, I look back at this painting and I see her droopy eyes and how her hair doesn't quite belong to her head and the weeping wallpaper. And I know that I'm not quite, I'm still not quite good. I'm still somewhat sick, but getting better. And so again, looking to art history, I came across this late 19th century painter, Charles Curran. And there's this famous quote by William de Kooning, and it reads, quote, "The landscape is in the woman, and there is woman in the landscape," end quote. And so this really starts to interest me, thinking about how male painters were making women to look like the flora and fauna that surrounds them, so that women are looking a lot like nature. And you can see here in this painting that Curran makes the female body look almost indistinguishable to the lily pads that surround them. Also, you can see in the wire structure of the parasol, the wire structure really mimics the veins inside the lily pads. And this is my painting, Peony. And again, I'm trying to make her look like the peonies that are next to her. And, you know, I didn't know this at the time I was painting this, but looking at it now, I'm so interested in how I drew those breasts. I mean, I like how they're wrapped around her belly and they almost look like baby bottles. But also what is interesting is that they, I don't know, if you look at the scientific drawings of flowers, botanical drawings, the shape of her breast looks so similar to the ovules or the ovaries of the inside of a flower. So then the pandemic hit, and my family moved back home. So both of my sons moved home, and one son's girlfriend moved in with us. Also, my husband moved his office to a spare bedroom in our house. So thinking back to the epiphany I had in grad school, which is that I'm really painting my environment. That's what I do. I paint the things around me in order to understand the world that I'm living in. And so I tell myself, I really don't need to look too far beyond myself for inspiration. Just paint the things that are in your environment. Paint the things that are under your nose. So it's the pandemic. I'm home with my family a lot. And so I just start painting the family. And this is my son's girlfriend, Kyra, and she is sitting in our living room. So that is my living room. This is a painting of my son, Sho, and he's holding his girlfriend, Kyra. And then, you know, again, my husband is home a lot more than usual. He has an office upstairs. And so I'm thinking a lot about the multicultural, multilingual household that I live in. And this image here is an image that is taken from my actual wedding photograph. Although there was no nudity in my actual photograph. But I'm interested in how the boundaries between class and culture get blurred over time. Another interesting thing about this painting, or at least I think it's interesting, is if you were to see this painting in real life, you would notice that the flowers really don't mimic flowers in nature. Rather, they mimic plastic flowers. They're super shiny, And, you know, acrylic paint can do that. It can look very plasticky. And I like that. I like the kitsch quality of that. I like the lowbrow quality of that. And you'll see how that becomes important to me as I move along here. So this is ofuro. Ofuro is the Japanese word for bath. And again, I'm thinking about the duality of class and culture. And I'm asking myself, what would an image look like if it had something that was highbrow and lowbrow side by side? So here, you know, she is taking up all of this space. She's flailing her washcloth about, not a care in the world. She's surrounded by all this chaos and mess on the floor, as well as her Dunkin' Donuts cups. And at the same time, he's sitting, taking up very little space, very composed. And he's in this oversized bathtub with his fancy dog looking on. This is odalisque with pink undies, inspired by Ingres' The Grand Odalisque of 1814. And again, looking at the juxtaposition of class, of social class, here she's striking this classical art historical pose, and at the same time she's holding on to a cheap beer in a can, a Bud Light, smoking a cigarette. And I'm happy to say that she now lives in Vermont. This is Spring Fever, which is the title of my exhibition. And this is also the smallest painting in the show. And this is my last slide. This is Dancing Couple, inspired by Colombian artist Fernando Botero. And I would say that this image here is about the intimacy of a long-term relationship. And also I'm thinking about what is good taste and what is bad taste. And who gets to decide what is good taste and bad taste? We know historically that women or anyone who's deemed the other have been left out of this decision-making process. So moving forward in my work, I'm interested in honoring the so-called unrefined objects and the spaces where we find these objects. And I'm also interested in continuing to explore the social and cultural hierarchies that we create for ourselves. So thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Barbara. It was great.
You're a star.
Water, my college, my college friend from Micah.
Believe it, that long ago. Yeah, you've always been so inspiring. I couldn't wait to watch. I'm so glad to see, you know, your work is always very, very unique. You know, I love that. I've always loved that. That you're a winner. I'm gonna mute myself.
Yes, thank you so much, Barbara. Hilary, you wanna jump in and get your presentation going?
Sure. Yeah, let me just share screen. All right. Well, thank you, Alison. Thank you, everyone who's joining us. Thank you for sharing, Barbara, everything. And it has been quite exciting to see all of the overlaps and intersections of our work. My name is Hilary Tait Norod, and my work also examines ideas of the home, of marriage, and of cultural expectations of gender. I use a thinking as making process as I decipher my personal relationships within the work, and I'm translating a lot of vulnerable sensibilities, cultural frictions. The investigation throughout my work is very much feminist, it's provisional, and it's determined. Now here on the left is an installation shot of one of my paintings at SVAC, and on the right, the full-size piece titled Chalkboard Diaries. In this painting, color partnerships are extremely important. They exist as a stand-in for social, biological, and cultural influences of gender. The main colors here are my number one favorite color, lime green, paired with a bright red and a large backdrop of this black chalkboard paint. Now red and green sit opposite on the color wheel, yet they're referred to as complementary colors. And when you put red next to green, the red looks more red and the green looks more green. So I'm using that color play to define sharp edges to the forms and polarize ideas of emotional depictions of marriage and partnership. So there's a tension of opposites uniting here. And now we also see these flames and they're engulfing a couple as they hang on to one another. They're twirling throughout a diaristic and romantic poetic script. And the lines on that background are grabbed from song lyrics that I might be listening to music while I'm in the studio. They might be confessional conversations I've had, things I've thought of saying, but it's very much like a young diary. Now, this next piece, I want to take a moment to show some work that has strongly inspired my own. This is a piece titled My Bed by the British artist Tracey Emin. Emin's work is a triumphant piece here. It's confessional, it's cathartic. She's putting her complete vulnerability in front of the viewer as a champion of feminism. And here on display is her actual bed, all the collections taken from her room after a personally challenging week post-breakup. She's acknowledging fleeting moments of grim self-reflection in order to demand her humanity here. Her work, just as Barbara had mentioned, is evaporating the lines between art and life. It's honest and it's an authentic installation. These two sculptures are my own that were created during my master's program at Lesley University. I was fairly new to the sculptural work and I was experimenting a lot with the physical objects that define my paintings. On the left is the aggressively bound love seat titled, If You're a Chair, I'm a Chair. I bind two antique chairs together in an uncomfortable but tenacious and strong display of unity. I cut the sides of these chairs so they could fit more closely together. I broke some of the spindles, I glued them, nailed them, tied them back together, and I meticulously wove and braided thoughtful objects onto the seat. On the right is an installation for my thesis titled 34 Things I Love About You in a Trust Fall. And it's really about leaping or falling into love. And here within the ideas and metaphors and the piece itself, balance is extremely important. So I learned a lot from making these sculptures and working three-dimensionally that informed my two-dimensional work and how I play with perspectives, but I also didn't want to lose sight of some of the grim application. Titled here is a piece that's on view at SVAC, Delicate Dynamite. I utilize now the chairs as a metaphor in the 2D platform. Well, there's a small fire we can see sitting frozen on the right-hand side. It seems harmless at the time, but there's the potential for it to grow and cause destruction onto these chairs. So that sense of fear that's been created is also creating a need for resolve. So the couple now shackled together, they have to stand together, they have to conquer together, they have to share together and struggle together. And so by sharing my own personal or intertwining my own personal conflicts and pleasures of a partnership, I'm hoping that the work fosters healthy conversations of romance and personal care. Another piece on view, wow is an all-purpose exclamation. And at this point, you might have realized I love making titles. They're really important to the work. And I enjoy coming up with some quite unique ones. Wow is an all-purpose exclamation encompasses the tangles and transformance of a household. I'm confronting the two-dimensional space here because I wanted the work to jump between an interior and an imagined exterior setting by pairing design elements, skewed perspectives with objects that are floating in between the fore and the background. I hope that they conjure a sense of dreaming and the subconscious. I believe personalities and objects can be contextualized in malleable ways, that they can be influenced by circumstantial and cultural experiences. And I also think of the word wow as an umbrella for emotions. We can think of all the different ways we use wow as a reaction to fear, amazement, irony, boredom, excitement. And so by comparing these transitional emotions with objects I'm using, like this red solo cups in the center, there's a metaphor. These red solo cups were once a vessel for teenage debauchery, but now are a cheap holder for a failed attempt at my first home vegetable garden. And to give a little context, this painting was created in 2020 at the onset of the stay-at-home order. And I was clearly struggling with this love-hate relationship of being so domestic. This next piece was created side by side simultaneously to wow, which is something I'm always doing. I'm always working on several paintings at once in the studio. I find that I learn a lot from one, and I might want to apply a new style or technique or color to another one, and they kind of grow side by side. I also knew in this piece that I wanted to use the checkered black and white tile floor as a reference to the home, but I wanted to include figures into the work. So both figures here appear to be feminine, but neither one explicitly shows any female parts. Both figures are fading into the scenery. Both take up the same amount of space. They're both holding on to living offerings, and both their faces are covered by items of beauty that bond the two together while still having no definition of gender. This work is straddling hemispheres of whimsy with the playful colors and streams, and also examines a peculiar side of identity. Here's an installation shot of the gallery. I wanted to show how the media, the imagery, and the scale of my work all directly report to the concept and the exploration of spousal relationships. The size of the paintings are confrontational. The palette is striking and bright with contrasting colors. And then here in the middle, we'll see the close-up of a painting, Father of the Bride. This is taking ideas about the traditions of heterosexual weddings that are always doused in extreme patriarchy and my kind of issues with that, while I fondly am remembering and leaving clues inside of the piece of my own wedding. And it kind of reports to that struggle between the issues I'm having with the traditions, but also just the pure joy and love for that day. And while I struggled with these ideas, we made our wedding quite unique in certain ways to overcome that. Just as my father and mother both walked me down the aisle, instead of a representation of man passing off ownership of the bride. And each moment in this painting is tells a certain story. I wanted to focus on two elements here. On the left is this playful lime green contemporary tutu that it's a representation of my love of dance. So it was very important for me to include some of the traditions in our wedding, like my first dance with my husband, to one of our favorite songs, I Would Die for You by Prince, and also my father and I's dance to My Girl. And close up on the right, on the top left corner of the right images, there are abstract feet outlined in black that are held upside down and walking off the canvas. And that's reminiscent of a game I used to love playing when I was young, when my dad called Walking on the Ceiling. He would actually hold me upside down and I would walk my feet on the ceiling of our house. I would be walking around light fixtures, stepping over door jambs. It was one of my favorite things. And looking back now, it's quite clear. I can see I love playing with what is reality and perspective and dimensions. but it was something that, we took with our own grace and stride of how fun and creative that was. And I just wanted to point this out, how every mark, every object is symbolic and intentional to the thoughts behind each piece. I also created these standing canvases that are combining both the sculptural things I've learned with paintings into life-size figures. I'm always trying to challenge myself to find a way for separate tones to coexist in one work of art. I want each piece to be both a robust scream of confident emotion and vulnerability, showing both strength and fear. Now, the title of one of these pieces, this is showing the back and front view, Haunting Romantics Turning My Ashes to Pigment. This is a joke, perhaps too dark of a joke, that I often tell my husband. I say, when I die, I want you to have my ashes turned into pigment and an artist create a painting with my ashes that will hang above our bed so that I can always haunt you. These paintings, I'm using oils on handmade canvases stretched with a clear vinyl, which is representative of the transparencies of the fears of strength and sometimes the direct and dark humor that we use to get through those emotions. These qualities of ambivalence and duality in my work are a reflection of the internal, combative, loving dialogues that are mixed with careful assessment of material connotations. I hope they create some sense of uncertainty. There's certainly some anxiety and tension there, but bonded loyalty. Now here is both sides of the other standing canvas of my amazing husband, Jack, who I think he's an advocate for my work, and I think a pretty willing participant. And I wanted to explain a little bit of the process of making this piece because it was completely new for me on these standing canvases. And I had carefully propped and positioned the canvas hovering above Jack's body as he lied still on our living room floor in his traditional sleeping position. And I carefully outlined his body in Sharpie. So his traditional sleeping position is one hand over his chest while the other hand is reached out to hold mine, similar to the life-mating otters who hold hands during their sleep as they float so they don't float away and lose each other. Something really sweet and very true to us, but also there's a moment here of navigating just honest communication and relationships and trying to find united emotions in the home. So you can see on the right side, there's an image of Jack's face. On the left, it seems to be covered up. Originally, this painting had two views of his face, but one day during 2020, we got into some disagreement. I don't remember what. It was probably some little bickering over household tasks like doing the dishes. And I stomped off into my studio to go paint away the emotions. And first thing I did was I painted that lime green and orange mask over his face. And he came in to check on me, really sweet, opened the door to see me painting him out. And yeah, I think that really is kind of an authentic and just honest moment of us in the home and playful. And then here we are in the exhibit at SVAC. That's the end of my talk. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who joined, who's listening, and I look forward to any questions you might have. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Hilary.
Thanks. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, thank you so much, Hilary. Again, we see some clapping emojis in there. Yes, that both of you, those were both really wonderful presentations. And as Barbara and Hilary have invited you, please drop some questions and comments in the chat. To kick off the Q&A, I have a couple questions, so I'll throw the first one out. We'll see where it takes us, and then we can go from there. I think there are a lot of threads to pull from in your work, Hilary and Barbara, looking at those interconnections. There was one element in particular that I wanted to pick up on, and maybe others have noticed it too, which is your use of humor. So Hilary, you were just talking about titles. I feel like most of the humor in your works sort of bubbles up in these really clever, witty titles. You know, I doubled my sleep shirts when I met you, 34 things I love about you. If you're a chair, I'm a chair. There's sort of this like chuckle factor to them. And there's really this element of sweetness. I mean, I know you mentioned the haunting romantic one is maybe a little dark, but on the whole, there's sort of a sweetness to these moments. And Barbara, I'd say that your humor is a little more salty. It's a little more pointed. One of my favorite moments is in the last work you showed us, Dancing Couple, where there's the small TJ Maxx tag that's left on the sole of the high heel shoe. I just love that moment. It's such a real moment. I'm also thinking about the dog. I'm not a dog person. Is it a Shih Tzu who's watching the couple copulating on the bed, and sort of that kind of cheeky moment. So just with those examples, and feel free to throw others into your responses, but could you tell us like why humor is important in your work, why you want visitors to have a laugh when they're looking at your works, and maybe a little bit why you sort of lean towards a particular type of humor. So either one of you can kick off a response to that question.
Yeah, I can jump into that. I think first, to give like a little history to my work, humor found a way really inevitably as soon as I started making very autobiographical work. And prior to that, I was making work based on neuroscience and perception disorders that I was studying, enjoying, and I was reading interviews and articles about people. And one in particular is the prosopagnosia, and inability for face recognition. It's a really awful disorder, but really fascinating and interesting. And there was this disconnect between myself, and I couldn't put humor in it because it wasn't my story to tell. And then as soon as I started telling my own stories, the humor just like, I think, kind of comes out and pours out at me. And it's something that I think is important in everyday life. And I use it in all those moments that you talked about, Alison. I think I use humor as like a way to settle maybe the sweetness and lovey-dovey, but I also use it as a coping mechanism to get through some dark traumas and moments and stuff. So I find humor very important in life and enjoy it. And so it just kind of happened to fall into that work that way.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think that, you know, if someone were to ask me if I thought my work was serious or humorous, I think I would say that it's serious. And you know, so I don't know, like, I think that when my work does show some humor, I think perhaps it's that, I think that we're talking about the uncanny. So something like you see something, you see a situation, and there's something not quite right about the situation. And it can be funny. It's almost like when, like a dark joke, like if something tragic happens, people sometimes laugh over it because you don't know how else to deal with it, right? So having said that, I think that, you know, when I am thinking about an image that I want to paint, if I were to start painting something the way I see it in reality, I think I would be bored to tears, right? So I have this feeling that I need to change something about it. And so that's maybe where the uncanny comes in. But the other thing is that when I'm actually painting, when I'm on top of my paintings, I don't feel like I am deliberately trying to be funny or humorous. But to be honest with you, when I step back from a painting, I always notice that, oh, there's something funny there. And so I will usually lean into it. So, my self-portrait, for example, which is not in the show, but it's on my website. I noticed that I had made the hands really large on my self-portrait, but I didn't really notice it until I stepped back. And I thought to myself, whoa, those hands, they're hilarious, right? They're really huge on this woman. And so then I had my husband model his hands for me, because I thought, okay, that would be a perfect source for this. And so that's an example of how I lean into it. I notice it and then I go with it. But yeah, like as far as the uncanny or something that is humorous, I guess it's for my own entertainment, my own interest, to keep myself interested.
Thank you both. I think it also, I always think about things from the visitor, the viewer's perspective. And I think the mechanism of humor almost helps create a feeling of like being on the inside. I feel like Hilary, with your titles, like there's just enough there that I think it's accessible to a viewer without really knowing the full joke or insider reference, but there's enough to hook onto. And Barbara, I like your use of the word uncanny. I think it's sort of like discovering those moments. Like when I'm not sure when I first looked at Dancing Couple if I noticed the TJ Maxx tag, but once I did, I felt like, oh, aha, I've sort of unpacked this other layer of the painting.
Right. And actually, one of the best moments I had in exhibiting work, well, it was a moment, that there was a mom, and this was years ago, and I had done this bunny painting. It was a bunny and a cat, and a mom was there with her little girl, and she said, oh, let's go see the cute bunny. Let's go see the cute bunny. And they ran up to the painting, and then the mother's like, oh, let's not look at this. And so yeah, so like those funny moments really do creep up on you. And with the Dancing Couple, at first I had her skirt tucked into her underwear. Like, she went to the bathroom and came back and didn't realize her skirt was tucked in her underwear. And so then I thought, okay, well then, so here I'm leaning into it. I thought, well, I'm going to put the toilet paper on the bottom of her heel. But I couldn't get the toilet paper to work compositionally. So that's how I switched to the TJ Maxx tag. But.
That's great. Well, we are getting close to 8. So I want to make sure if any of our attendees has a question or a comment, that there's time for that. So feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, it looks like Patty. Did you?
Barbara.
Hi, Patty.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your looking back at art history and sharing that with us, and it was just it was really wonderful. I'm going to email you the name of another artist who is also, her whole oeuvre has been inspired by that one woman's painting of the odalisque in the green and white pants.
Oh,
so I'll send you her name. She's a wonderful painter in Seattle. But my comment was, you're talking about your humor and your hands. I thought that was so interesting that you were surprised when you saw that the hands were large, because when I look at your work, it's, it seems really apparent, and it's both the humor and the way you see things are so unique to you. And that's what, when I see a painting of yours, there's not a question who did it, which I think is the mark of really authentic paintings. So that's just, I just really appreciate that in your work, because they're so obviously you.
Thank you. And I think also that's probably why I'm not always aware of what I'm doing.
Right.
Eventually I see things, but I'm not always aware, I have to admit.
Yeah, I think it's better that way. I mean, it's less self-conscious that way.
I totally agree. Because it's very, Barbara, forgive me, but there's associations that come up with that kind of almost like, again, I'm going to use adjectives that might annoy you, and I hope not, but Flintstone-y, Picasso distortion, abstraction. You know, it's kind of like that clay that we had and we put on newspapers as a kid. What was that called? And you stretched it out as some
Silly putty.
yeah, silly putty that the plumber invented. I agree that it's more than just the hands. It's a stylistic thing that I've seen mature as the years went by, and it's really, really interesting to me because I agree with the point Patty made. There's many artists that have difficulty in going into that space where they're not frightened of the edges of the canvas, or they're not frightened by the whatever is bubbling inside them. So it's, as someone who's had an opportunity to watch for decades, and I know it sounds like I'm flattering, but I'm not really. You're a really good artist. And I also enjoyed the talk that you also gave, Hilary. It's beautiful, and I like your work too. I don't want to sound like I'm completely prejudiced, but I probably am a little biased, but I had to agree with Patty. Sorry to jump in there, but I totally agree with that.
Thank you, Water.
May I make a comment about both artists? Both your presentations were really fascinating, and I think without them, I would not have appreciated the art as much. So I think both of you have moved into a realm of art that's both visual and verbal, verbal concepts, ideas that purely representational artists they don't do. And especially Hilary, with yours, I would not have gotten some of the jokes. For example, the failed vegetable garden. You know, that would have been totally lost on me. What I appreciated in both your works, well, Hilary, I appreciated your use of colors and the vibrant complementary colors that you mentioned right at the beginning of your talk. You really, I mean, those are zingers of colors. And Barbara, what I appreciated in yours were the painful exploration of female vulnerability in the nudity of the drawings. For example, the men were usually clothed, except in the bathtub scene and the copulation scene, but the men were clothed and the women were bare. And in some ways, it was a bit embarrassing because how come the men are clothed? How come the women are naked? That was upsetting and jarring to me. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Well, that's wow. So, you know, how can I say this without sounding like an angry person? But, you know, it's the male gaze, right? And how can I flip that? And, you know, historically, I mean, you know, I talked a lot in my talk about how women didn't even have that. Not only did they not have access to education, they didn't have access to the art room, right? The atelier. So, so my work is a lot about flipping the male gaze. Like the men have been looking at women for such a long time. And so how can I take that and throw it back on my time in my own terms? So I'm not giving you a gorgeous odalisque to look at, am I? I'm giving you an older woman with droopy breasts, bulging bellies, knobby hands. So I'm owning it.
Why not then present the woman as clothed and looking svelte and the man looking really dumpy and naked?
I don't know. I could, maybe that'll be my next painting. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Barbara. I can I just respond to what John just said about why not have the woman be clothed and looking. I think that it's important for people to, or for maybe it emphasizes the discomfort that maybe people are already feeling about the male gaze and how women are portrayed. And it highlights that. I like that I feel uncomfortable about the woman's nudity next to the man in the suit. She feels exposed and vulnerable, and that's the reality a lot of the time. So I appreciate it. And I think it's important to highlight. But I have a question for you, Barbara, about animals and how animals, sort of come in and out of your work. Seeing your dog in the paintings that you showed tonight, I was also remembering that your earlier work, the first work of yours that I ever saw, were rabbits and kittens from Japanese. I don't think they're anime, but imagery from Japan. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what is the actual question?
Okay, so what I'm wondering is, I see animals sort of coming in and out of your work in a timeline, and I know that you are actually working with animals more in your life. And so I'm wondering how your relationship to animals are, if you anticipate that might get reflected in work that you're doing now going forward, or if those things are sort of separate, or how important you think the animals are as sort of intermediaries for the people in your work.
Yeah, I mean, so they used to be intermediaries, right? So I definitely in the past, because before the cat and the bunny paintings, I was doing abstract work. And the reason I stopped doing abstract work was because I really felt I had a story to tell. I wanted my work to be narrative. I had this story that was bubbling, and I needed to do something with it. And that was where the bunnies and the cats came in. And I was using them as a facade. I was still a little shy about sharing my story. And so I'm like, well, no one will know if I make a cat and a bunny. So that was how that started. But now with the animals coming into my work feels very, very different. And to be honest with you, I really don't know. It's something I'm discovering. And so so Kelly was referring to the fact that I work on a farm a couple days a week. And I feed about 70 animals. And my husband comes with me one of those days. So it's like a really nice activity that we do together. And we both love animals. And to be honest, I worry about our stewardship of not only the environment, but how we are taking care of animals. And it just makes me incredibly, incredibly sad that we're not doing a better job than what we're doing. And so when I go to the farm and I see these animals, I'm just so enamored of them. I'm so in love with them. And as I said early on, making images is just how I learn about the world around me. It's just how I interpret everything that's going on around me. So really, to answer your question, where am I going with the animals? How is it making sense in my work? I don't know. So that's that's something to look forward to, right? It's a reason to keep making art.
That kind of brings up a question I had for you, Hilary. Barbara, you were talking about how animals maybe earlier in your work were sort of stand-ins for yourself. And Hilary, I think I mentioned this to you, that one of the key differences I picked up on between the two of you is, Barbara's work is very much centered on the human figure, and yours with the exception of a few pieces, is mostly absent of yourself, of human figures. And that's really curious to me, since it is so autobiographical. And John was even sharing, you know, you're so intentional about the inclusion of details, and each of them has a significance, a really personal significance to you. But very rarely do you put yourself, your body into the work. So I was wondering if you could talk about that choice, and what, you know, you feel you gain, what you achieve by removing yourself from the piece.
Sure. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I do it for several reasons. I think part of it is still like self-preservation in a way, as I'm talking about really personal moments, but also largely I hope that it achieves more accessibility. I think that I'm sharing really personal and specific things, but I hope that it kind of fosters a dialogue for others to share and look at their closest relationships, look at how we think about and categorize gender expectations. And so if I don't show my face, I'm hoping the audience can come into that piece with their own ideas and thoughts, and whether it's shifting or changing them, but it's just creating this conversation for hopefully a more inclusive space, really. Yeah, so I think that it, like, without having a particular face on there, I hope that it's more engaging.
Well, I have a follow-up, Hilary. When you exhibit your paintings, do you give some kind of a guide for the viewer? Because I would not necessarily have picked up on the fire being a danger to the chairs in the one painting. I would have wondered, I might have thought of it as being a little family hearth. And the do you provide a description?
So I guess it depends on the setting. Like, there is a description up at SVAC that has a little artist bio that kind of goes into just the idea that they're all very thoughtful and what I'm talking about. But I hope that my titles clue you in to look for a little bit more. And then also, when you get up close to the work, there is a lot of hidden text in there. And if you can get up close and read it, it's a lot of it is song lyrics, but they can be quite directing. There's one piece where it's another one that's very symbolic of, it's not on view, but it's two jeans, like two pairs of pants. It's me and my husband's, and it's connected by a spine. And then if you read the back text, there's this little script that says, "My tongue dances behind my teeth for you." And it's just like this romantic outpour. But at first you kind of see this grotesque, like, skeleton bones. And so I try to find little clues in there that makes you want to stay with the work a little bit longer, but I don't necessarily have write-ups always below them. But yeah, it depends a lot on what the setting is, and, you know, if the gallery allows it. But it's a really good question, and it's certainly got me thinking of how can I introduce this more to the viewer. So yeah. Thank you.
Because I really appreciated your paintings a lot more with your description.
Thank you. Okay, I got to find a way to work it in more.
Can I throw in 2 more cents, Hilary?
Yeah.
I hear what you're all saying, and these are wonderful comments and insights. I love them all. But I would hesitantly say, Mr. Miner, I think that's your name. I'm sorry, Miner, Mr. Miner, John.
Yeah, John.
John, thank you. That, you know, part of the appeal for me with strong art is the mystery. And I'm sure it is for you too, some of it. Mm-hmm. And there is a magic that happens, as you probably practice yourself, in the execution and creation of these unique things that don't exist in the world until someone like Barbara and Hilary, you know, help us out. Right. And I think to try to, for lack of a better phrase, have it a little bit more easily understood. For example, you mentioned the vegetable in the red cups. the vegetable garden. And I don't think that that has to be something that is made clear, you know? And like historically, there's so many artists that when we find out later, usually after they're dead, you know, what has gone into certain works, and it's always another layer that's fascinating. And I hear your point, but I would beg to differ that I think I would be hesitant to tell you to make it more clear. I think, you know, that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Well,
I'm going to mute myself now.
Well, and I would also add, I think that's the role of the exhibiting institution to help the viewer, to help the visitor. So that's where that kind of, collaboration between artists and a place like SVAC, I think that's where it gets sort of juicy and interesting, is we sort of have to think about our audience and what stories do we need to make clear to our audience. And so that's why it's really, I feel like I have an incredible job, because I get to have these direct conversations with artists like Hilary and Barbara, unlike some other museum contexts where it's mostly artists who are not living that you're trying to interpret. So I think
I have a point to that too. A thing like the red solo cups, everybody that looks at that painting is going to have a different experience of those solo cups and different memories. And if it is too spelled out that this was a vegetable garden that failed, that I don't get my memory of it, you know? And that's what's so great about art, is because people do bring their own stuff when they're looking at paintings, and they need to be open enough to allow that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, kind of like not using my face or everything so that you can bring in your own baggage or, you know, your own bag of emotions with it. But yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah.
It looks like we're at 8:16, so I just want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a wonderful discussion, and since we did record it, it will live in posterity for future artists and curators, art historians to reference, but maybe more immediately, please do share it with friends and family that you think would be interested in this talk. We'll probably get that posted in the next couple of days or next week sometime. But really, thank you so much to Hilary and to Barbara for the work you put into your presentations tonight, for the work you have loaned to SVAC. We're so honored to exhibit your artwork. It is up until August 1st, which doesn't leave a lot more time for you all to come see it if you haven't had a chance. But you can follow Barbara and Hilary on social media and on their websites and find out where else they're exhibiting in the months and years to come. But again, thank you everyone for being here, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to see you,
everyone.
Barbara.
Sherry,
Hey.
Patty, Andrea, John, Jenny, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
That was wonderful, Barbara.
Thank you. I think that Hilary's gone.
I know, I should have said before, let's just stick around for a minute, but
Okay.
yeah,
So much. That was so much fun.
it went really, really well.
Yeah, so much fun. And I got to see my college girlfriend that I haven't seen in years.
Ah, that's so great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Again, thank you.
yep, we'll talk to you soon.
I'll see you in a week or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good night.